In this video, we're going to talk about guiding transformational change. What is transformational change and how do we in HR help that take root in the organization? That's coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. I'm the host of HR Shop Talk. On this show, you get expert insight into HR. I encourage you to subscribe to the show or podcast to keep learning from my guests. Today, my guest is Jordan Ludwig. Jordan is a transformational change consultant and a principal with Stacked Consulting, which, given his expertise, is why he's on the show today. Hi, Jordan. How are you?
I'm doing well, Andrea. How are you?
I'm good. Looking forward to this. Okay, but let's just dive in. So we talk about change a lot in HR. What is transformational change and what makes it different than other change?
So I would say the biggest difference between regular change and transformational change is mindset. So specifically, I want you to think about setting some kind of goal for yourself, be it maybe you want to earn a little bit more money. Now, you can go out with a plan to earn 2% more, and to do that, you'd maybe take a side job, work a little bit harder for it, 5% more, 10% more, maybe that's the same strategy. At what point do you need to change the thinking and the perspective, your mindset, because just working a little bit harder isn't going to actually accomplish what that goal is? So transformational change, starting with mindset, I'd say it has to be a big, ambitious goal where you're not just going for a 1% or a 2% improvement or change for it. It needs to be something bigger. There's a lot of different words that people use for that. You might hear BHAG or big, hairy, audacious goal, or your top or grand challenges for it. It's some kind of goal that you're setting out where it's bigger, bolder than just your typical onesie, twosie percent improvement.
Right. Okay. So what external factors are going to make you want to set that big, hairy, audacious goal and get into transformational change as opposed to just incremental change?
Yeah, so I'd say it's not like a set list, but oftentimes external factors are what the prompts might actually be for that. So that could be, in some cases, a change to the competitive landscape. Maybe a competitor is doing something different and it's taking share at a rapid rate, or you're not seeing yourself keep pace. Or maybe you're just taking a look at where you want to go and what you want to accomplish, and you know that the existing game, the same game that you've been playing, isn't what's going to get you there. So oftentimes it is a bit of a market force or response, or sometimes a regulatory ruling or a change in customer behavior or dynamic that would lead you to some kind of trigger that says, yes, we need to do something different. This isn't just about getting a little bit better. We need to change the game. We need to think differently.
It feels like anything less than transformational change is you're just wimping out. Like, is that...
I don't think that's the case. I think there's always going to be a point in a time and a place for getting a little bit better. And in reality, the execution habits would suggest that. Like, sometimes transformational change gets very scary in the face of it, or it's very large and big. You still need room for that coming in and getting 1% better every single day. There's a point in time to do that type of activity, and it's more about knowing which type of path we need to be on for it. So I don't think this is the only path. I don't think it's the absolute end all be all. It's a situational one that you can't be afraid of when it comes time.
How do you tell when it is, it's the 1%, the 2% type of change and transformational change?
Right. So for us, if I'm thinking about at a project kickoff, it needs to be through conversation. You need to be having discussion with people, and people are very, I would say, transparent and forthright in the verbs that they use. And when you're having a conversation about what we're trying to get better, if they're using limiting type of words for it, yeah, we just need this. Okay. Even if we could accomplish something like this. Yeah, but like, as soon as they're putting up those kind of defensive or the barriers for it, you know that it's really not pushing as far as you might otherwise want to, versus this needs to be different. we need to think harder about this. This can't just be rolling out the same thing we've done before. There's this desire to go past and beyond. So a lot of it's just picking up on people's veiled meaning in their body language, in their stories when they're actually getting you on board or having that first conversation.
Oh, interesting. All right. So when you are going into an organization and they've agreed to, and they're using all those right words and verbs to describe what they're going to do, what internal factors, in addition to that, need to be in place for success?
Right. So I'll use the first one that comes to mind when you say that is alignment, and specifically alignment of the senior leaders that need to be the ones that are pushing this forward. And I'm going to push it a little bit further because it's often very rare that you get all leaders at the same pace where they're like emotionally bought in at the same rate. They're like every other person where they're coming across this epiphany at different stages. So you'll have some people, they're racing out front and they're ready to do the work and have the conversations. You'll have some people that are doing a bit of the dance and still going through their own realizations and epiphanies about how much is this actually needed. So it's a fallacy to think everyone is going to be at the same place at the same time. It doesn't occur very often, I should say. So it's beyond smiles, it's beyond feigned kind of, yeah, we're going through, we're doing this, and you truly get that emotional buy-in and alignment.
Can I ask you a question? So like in that group there that you just described, you're going to have those people who are like, we need this to be different. This has to be, we aren't going to survive if we don't dramatically change. And then you have the other people also in the same room going, yeah, but we just need, and that's more of that, that's the not transformational kind of change. So how do you reconcile when you've got both of those people in the room? And I imagine that's almost always the case, that you have that people at different phases of acceptance.
Yeah, so it's you really need to make what I would say is a situational judgment call in the moment. Okay. I wish there's a better way to go about it than that. And there's times where it's worth halting production. You need to hit the panic button on the assembly line to stop and get to that alignment. There's other times where you know that people are saying the right things and they're going through the journey. And that you do have the permission to proceed, but it's a watch and you need to have the conversation and continue to monitor. It becomes something that you have a pulse on through the project. So it's about making that call that says, we're saying the right things, but I think it's worthy of stopping production and having a harder conversation. Or, yeah, we're just going to watch and monitor this and continue to do what we need to do to help support people to get their heads to the right spot.
Yeah. Okay. So when you have to have that conversation, the hard one, what does that look like?
It's just putting it on the table, but like flat and simple. It's anytime you've had a hard conversation in your life, it's just as simple as having a hard conversation. I say that simple, not easy. That's probably the right way to think about it. There's no secret sauce or panacea to it. It's, hey, I think we're at different points. I see some of us are here and we're ready to progress, and some of us are back here, and we need to understand and talk about that. So let's give air. There's no judgment. Let's have a conversation about why we feel the way we feel, both objectively, subjectively, bring data in, bring emotion and logic in, and have a bit of a conversation and get to a point where we can reconcile.
Mm-hmm. And you facilitate that? You sort of sit down and get all the players in a room and facilitate some sort of hard conversation like that?
Yeah, we will. That doesn't have to be the path. That is often a path when you get down that area if we're helping a client for it. Sometimes they'll do better and they say, hey, we just need to get in our room and do this ourselves for it too. And that's an okay outcome too. It's not like it needs to be one way or the other, as long as we get to that success factor of alignment.
So we were talking about internal factors needed for project success, and we talked about alignment. Anything else before?
I would say like beyond alignment. So alignment's like that first factor out of the gate.
Yeah.
Ones they're less so about triggers and starts, and it's more about sustainment. How do we make sure that we don't come through this? And I get to two of them. They're slightly related, but I get to conviction and courage. And it's because as you continue to progress through a transformational change, you will have change resistance. You'll have this reticence. The system will defend itself.
Yeah.
And you need to have courage and conviction to stay the course, but not be so dug in that you're not listening and responsive for it too. So those factors like that alignment trigger up front, really important to get started, staying the course, conviction and courage.
Whenever you get a client saying, I want to do such and such, and sometimes they understand how much they're going to have to put into it. And so, that courage, conviction, other times they don't. They're hoping for the easy way out. And so characterizing it as a courage and conviction is interesting.
What it might mean for HR too, like if you'd like to, like if you're thinking about supporting, if you're an HR professional and needing to support leaders through this, you can identify this at every stage of the game, right? Like early days, do we have alignment? Midpoint, sustaining front, what do you need to do to have those conversations to observe whether or not your leader is faltering on conviction and courage? And what does that conversation need to look like? So those are ways that you can act as a strategic business partner, contributing immense value to the sustainment and the success of whatever this transformational change is.
Right. So when you're going to have that conversation with the leader, basically, leader, I sense you're lacking either courage or commitment to see this through. What's going on? Is it that blunt?
I would say no. And yes, it's a fair kind of characterization for it. If I was to approach that conversation,
okay,
it would probably be leading with a lot more questions. How are you feeling about this? Is there any point of you that feels like this is not the right thing to do?
Right.
How did we get to this point? What were the inputs for this along the way? So it's less about putting an observation where, again, their system will then defend itself and they'll get defensive.
Right.
Them to explore the situation, remember the logic that went into it, not be blind to the new data and the inputs for it along the way. So you're helping them through that path, that discovery.
If you've had any kind of revelation here, subscribe to see all the episodes and comment. Have you been through transformational change? What did you learn about that? Share with me and with others in the comment section. And Jordan, so when you're guiding an organization through transformational change, if you were to lay out the steps, what would they be?
So I would tell you the steps aren't much different from regular change. And again, from mindset perspective, it's more about the intention of how we want to lead and manage this. And some of the steps are a little counterintuitive. So to elaborate on that, these types of projects, it's less about building a house where there's a defined series of, well, you have to pour the foundation and then you have to do the structure and then we do, okay. There's very linear sequential steps.
Yes.
This is more about surfing and you're responding and reacting to the moment, the environment with the stimulus that it's actually giving you for it. And really the analogy I want to give you there is if you try to really hold on tight to manage transformational change, it's not going to work. We're not capable of managing all of those and controlling and dust. We're going to crush it to death. This is more about being okay with the discomfort of not having control over every single situation and relinquishing ourselves to that kind of force or that type of power for it. So now, there certainly are steps, though. So let's talk about what those steps are and then how instead you might choose to manage this along the way. So if I had to think about the steps again, align leaders up front, to reiterate from before, you want to engage the operators. So specifically for any type of transformational change to actually take hold and take root, no matter what it is, you need buy-in from the people that have to live that later on. And you can only accomplish that buy-in if you go to them and engage them and have their role in the solution, be very human-centric about it. When you've engaged them, you need to listen, and then you need to respond and act and follow through for it too. And from there, you rinse, repeat. Like it's not very much different. It's not like there's this silver bullet of laying down the path or, okay, we know where we want to go. Let's get input and buy-in on that path. Let's respond and listen to what that is and what that looks like. Now, the way that you want to manage that, though, is that, and this is where some of the counterintuitive nature of this might come in for it, is you want to always have a pulse, a hand on the pulse. Again, you're riding the wave on what this change might actually look like. And where the counterintuitiveness comes in is, let's take a look at something like a metric on how many people are paying attention to a communication update that a leader is giving. Normally, under any type of change, if you can get really high metrics, high numbers on viewership, on watching, what that is, that's perceived as success. Now, in transformational change, it's actually the opposite. I'm waiting to actually see a dip in the numbers, and that's positive. And that means we've gotten through the point where people aren't so nervous about looking or waiting to hear about what the change is. They're getting back to what their day-to-day is. So we're actually waiting for that dip in a second where they're saying, hey, it looks like this is now starting to take hold, take shape. People aren't walking on eggshells anymore. We're getting back to this along the way. So there is some of those kind of counterintuitiveness of when we're looking through, how do we want to think about that in the larger kind of light of this change? And the last thing that I'd say to it is, one of the best activities you can do if you are going down a path of transformational change is you don't let it become a life of its own. And to do that, you have a ceremonial end to it. Doesn't mean the work stops, because oftentimes the change requires sustained activity and effort, but we have to stop calling and giving life to this now growth that has established of transformational change. No. We're done the material, the work. That work's going to continue and change, but it's no longer we're going to live and give life to this beast that's emerged called transformation.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. Do you have any examples that, of a transformational change that you guided through?
Sure. So a couple come to mind. I'd say it could be the creation of a new business unit if it's something that's dramatically different, or anytime you truly need to change your operating model, which is really saying we're going to change what it needs to work here. But I think the example I give you is merging a company. So you've done an acquisition and you need to actually merge together these organizations. Now that could be its own entire topic and what that actually means. But think about it on its face. It is transformational change. It's dramatically changing people. Leaders are going to be at different stages for it. How do we lead through that type of example for it? And steps are the same. We need to align the leaders. We need to engage the operators. We need to have a goal in mind of what it is that we're going to try to accomplish. And we need to respond to the stimulus that we're learning as we learn new things, because our planning is undoubtedly going to be wrong. We're not going to accomplish or cover everything when we set out to grab that path. So it's how you respond. It's how we take that information, respond to it in real time, ride the wave, and continue.
You talk about that. I'm getting this feeling that it's actually pretty unpredictable. Well, I don't know, maybe not unpredictable, but you're responding as the stimulus comes up. How much planning do you even do then?
So you need to plan, and failure to plan is plan to fail. And I truly do believe all of those elements, but it's about not trying to plan to the infinite level of detail and knowing and assuming that your plan is not going to cover all your bases. So with that in mind, having a first best guess of a plan, and then mechanisms to learn about where your plan is wrong, and then it's how you respond. So planning up front is really crucial and important, but just as important and sometimes underestimated is how you think about setting up the systems to get feedback on whether the plan is wrong and what this moment. So yes, planning importance, but it's a starting position. And from there, we have to learn, we have to evolve with.
Okay. What is the hardest part of transformational change, and how do you overcome it? Okay, can I stop? Just time out for a second. Can I guess? Is it alignment?
It's not alignment.
It's not. Oh, okay. Well, tell me.
No. The The reason it's not alignment, because you're not wrong. Alignment is one of the hardest things but again, it's a trigger. If you don't have alignment, you don't have transformational change. Like it's a false choice.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So if we don't have alignment, we're probably not going down the path, or the leadership's going to materially change and one side's going to win out than the other. And then we're either down a path of yes or no. So that's why I would say it's not, is if we don't have it, there isn't. So my perspective.
Okay. All right. So what is the hardest part then?
So the hardest part is, again, it's staying the course. It's having that courage in the direction. And I want to give you a bit of a visualization to it. So the effort curve, if you think about executing a transformational change, it needs to be really high off the bat and sustained for a long period of time. The outcome curve is the opposite. Your outcomes, your impact of that is very low until eventually it has this.
Okay.
And that gap in between, whatever that gap is that it looks like, that is where your courage and your conviction is the hardest input for it. Is you're not seeing the output, you're seeing people kind of be stuck in and dug in. And it's the situation that I want you to consider in your head and put yourself in the shoes of being a leader here. You believe in your heart and in your mind and in the data, the science, whatever it is that's driven you down this path. You believe it's the right area, the right direction that you need to go. But you need to be responsive to what people are telling you. But there's change resistance. That is a very fine line of balance between having certainty and conviction in your path and being stuck in and dug in and not willing to learn anymore. So what is the difference in that line? And that is where a leader is going to feel most vulnerable during this type of situation for it. So having courage, having conviction, but not being dug in is undoubtedly the hardest way to carry yourself as a leader through those early months of whatever the change is.
Well, thanks, Jordan. That was so great. I did an episode on change management, focusing on ProSci, and a link to that is right here. Thanks for watching and see you next time.